It all started, as most unsettling truths do, with a whisper from the past. My grandfather, Arthur Vance, was a quiet man, a man of routines, of measured words, and a gaze that always seemed to hold a secret, like an untold story flickering behind his eyes. He passed away when I was young, leaving behind a legacy of quiet strength and a dusty old attic filled with forgotten relics. Among them, in a locked cedar chest, lay the first piece of a puzzle that would unravel my understanding of reality. I was cleaning out the attic, years later after my grandmother had moved into assisted living. It was a chore, really, one of those tasks you keep putting off. Dust motes danced in the sparse sunlight filtering through a grimy window, illuminating forgotten furniture, draped in white sheets like ghosts awaiting their revival. The cedar chest was tucked away in a corner, unassuming, almost camouflaged by time. I remembered my grandmother once saying, "Don't touch your grandfather's chest, dear. Some things are best left undisturbed." Of course, that only made it more intriguing. Inside, beneath layers of moth-eaten blankets and old photographs, was a small, crudely fashioned wooden box. No lock, no fancy carving, just a simple latch. My heart began to beat a little faster. This felt different, more personal, more forbidden. I opened it. The first thing I saw wasn't jewelry or old coins, but a worn leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, filled with my grandfather's neat, almost clinical handwriting. Next to it lay a tarnished brass compass. It was heavy in my hand, the needle inside twitching erratically, as if confused by its surroundings. But it was the journal that truly called to me. Its cover, strangely, was blank. No title, no date, just dark, aged leather. I carefully opened it, and the scent of old paper and something else, a faint metallic tang, filled the air. The first entry was dated December 6, 1945, and the words in my grandfather's precise script sent a shiver down my spine. They're gone, all of them. And the sea swallowed their secrets, but not the truth. December 6, 1945. That date hammered in my mind. It wasn't just any date. It was the day after Flight 19 vanished, the infamous squadron of 5 Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared without a trace in the Bermuda Triangle. And the rescue plane sent after them, a Martin Mariner, also vanished, taking 13 men with it. One of the greatest aviation mysteries of all time. My grandfather, a simple tailor, what could he possibly have known about such an event? He was thousands of miles away in a small town in Ohio, or so I believed. Yet his words were unequivocal. They're gone, and the sea. As I read on, the journal entries became less about daily life and more about cryptic observations, strange diagrams and coded messages. He wrote about the anomaly, the visitors, and the protocol. His words hinted at things no ordinary man should know. He mentioned places I'd never heard of, experiments, and a veil that separated our reality from something else entirely. It was a dizzying descent into a world I thought only existed in fiction. One particular entry, several pages in, stopped me cold. It was a detailed drawing of a strange metallic object, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't a plane or a ship. It was sleek, seamless, with strange symbols etched into its surface. Below the drawing he had written, "The source of the whispers. They've been here longer than we know, watching, waiting." Suddenly, my quiet grandfather, the man who taught me how to tie my shoes and bait a fishing hook, transformed into a shadowy figure, a keeper of dangerous secrets. My grandmother's warning echoed in my ears. Some things are best left undisturbed. But it was too late. The Pandora's box was open, and I was compelled to follow the breadcrumbs my grandfather had left behind. I had to know, what did he really do? What truth did he carry to his grave about Flight 19 and the Bermuda Triangle? And what did he mean by the whispers and the visitors? My journey had just begun, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would lead me far beyond the quiet life I had always known, into the heart of a classified secret hidden for decades.
The attic, once a space of forgotten memories, now felt like the epicenter of a conspiracy. I brought the journal and the compass down to my study, the weight of them in my hands feeling far heavier than their physical mass. For the next several days, I became a recluse, a ghost in my own home, poring over the cryptic entries my grandfather had left behind. The journal was a labyrinth. Pages of seemingly normal observations about the weather or his garden were interspersed with complex star charts, mathematical equations that were far beyond my comprehension, and recurring symbols that resembled no known alphabet. He wrote in codes, simple ciphers at first, which I managed to break with some effort, but they only led to more complex, layered enigmas. He was paranoid and brilliant. He had designed this journal to be a fortress, but a fortress with a key, if only I could find it. One phrase appeared again and again, like a haunting refrain: Project Aegis. It was never explained, just referenced in connection with the anomaly on the erratic compass. My first instinct was to search online, but the results were a dead end. Thousands of hits for modern tech companies, Greek mythology, naval weapon systems, but nothing connected to the 1940s. It was a ghost, a word that, according to the public record, had no business being in my grandfather's journal. My next step was to find out who my grandfather really was. I had his old discharge papers from the Army. They stated, in black and white, that Arthur Vance served as a quartermaster clerk at a supply depot in Dayton, Ohio from 1942 to 1946. Honorable discharge. No commendations, no special notes. A perfectly boring, perfectly believable military record. But it didn't fit. How could a supply clerk in Ohio have intimate knowledge of a naval aviation disaster off the coast of Florida? How could he draw alien technology and chart unknown stars? The official story was a lie, a carefully constructed facade. Frustrated, I turned back to the journal, looking for anything I might have missed. And there, tucked into a small envelope glued to the inside back cover, was a single, faded photograph. It showed a group of 5 young men in civilian clothes, standing on a sun-drenched pier. They were smiling, squinting in the bright light. And in the back row, looking younger than I'd ever seen him, was my grandfather. On the back of the photo, a single, handwritten line: "The Boys from Aegis, Key West, 1945. My blood ran cold. Key West. He wasn't in Ohio. He was in Florida, the staging ground for so much of the military's activity in the Atlantic. He was there, right at the heart of it all. As I stared at the photo, at the hopeful faces of those young men, I noticed something else. At the bottom, a name was written in a different pen, as if added later: Elias Thorne. An arrow pointed to a lanky, dark-haired man standing next to my grandfather. Was he still alive? Could he be the key? That night, with a storm raging outside, I spread out an old map of the Florida coastline on my desk, the journal open beside it. I was tracing the flight path of Flight 19 from Fort Lauderdale out over the Atlantic when the old brass compass, which had been sitting motionless, began to twitch. Slowly, deliberately, its needle swung away from true north. It wasn't spinning erratically anymore. It was pointing to a specific, desolate spot on the map, deep within the boundaries of what the world would come to know as the Bermuda Triangle. It was pointing to a secret my grandfather had died to protect.
The compass's unwavering needle was a direct command. It wasn't just a relic, it was a pointer, a silent guide to something extraordinary.
The spot it indicated on the map was a patch of deep blue ocean, far from any shipping lanes, a place where, according to my grandfather's journal, the veil was thin. My initial research into Project Aegis had been futile, but now, with the name Elias Thorne and the location of Key West, I had new threads to pull. I spent days sifting through old military archives, digitized newspapers, and obscure veterans forums. It was like searching for a ghost in a library of forgotten voices. Most mentions of Key West in 1945 revolved around naval operations and training, perfectly mundane. But I wasn't looking for mundane. I was looking for the cracks in the facade. It was in a barely legible digitized copy of a local Key West newspaper from late 1945 that I found a small, almost ignorable obituary. It was for Elias Thorne. Date of death, December 7th, 1945, the day after Flight 19 vanished. Cause of death was listed vaguely as an unfortunate accident during naval maneuvers. Too convenient, too swift. He died the very next day. My grandfather's friend from Project Aegis. This wasn't an accident. This was a cover-up. The realization hit me like a cold wave. My grandfather wasn't just an observer. He was part of this, and he must have seen what happened to Elias or known what it meant to guard his secrets so fiercely. I returned to the journal, this time with a new perspective. The coded messages, the strange diagrams, they weren't just abstract musings. They were information, carefully hidden. One page, filled with what looked like gibberish, suddenly made sense. It wasn't random letters. It was a substitution cipher using the nautical alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. Working late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and a growing sense of dread, I began to decode. The first message revealed was chilling. They took him, not the sea, the lights. They came for him after. Elias. They came for Elias. Who were they? The government? Or the visitors my grandfather had alluded to? Another cipher, more complex, revealed a sequence of numbers. They looked like coordinates, longitude and latitude. I plotted them onto my map, my hand trembling slightly. The coordinates led to the exact spot the brass compass was pointing to, the deep blue expanse within the Bermuda Triangle. This was it. This was the location of the anomaly, the thin veil. My grandfather wasn't just documenting a mystery. He was leaving a roadmap to a truth so profound, so dangerous, that he couldn't speak it aloud. He had entrusted it to me years after his death through ink and paper and an old, unpredictable compass. What awaited me at those coordinates? A sunken plane? A natural anomaly? Or something far more alien and incomprehensible? The rational part of my mind screamed for caution, for logic, but the whispers from the journal, the echoing dread of Elias Thorne's fate, urged me forward. My grandfather's secret wasn't meant to die with him. It was meant to be found. And I, his unwitting heir, was now bound to its chilling revelation. The ocean was calling, and I knew I had to answer.
The coordinates burned in my mind. They represented not just a location, but a destination for a journey I never asked for, yet felt compelled to undertake. My research had hit a wall. Every official avenue led to dead ends or fabricated narratives. If I wanted answers, I had to go to the source, to the heart of the enigma. I had to go to the Bermuda Triangle. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. Friends and family thought I was crazy when I vaguely mentioned a research trip to the Bahamas. I couldn't tell them the truth, not yet. How could I explain a mysterious journal, a sentient compass, and a grandfather who was secretly entangled in one of the 20th century's greatest mysteries? They'd think I needed a psychiatrist, not a boat. I booked a flight to Miami, then a charter boat to the general area, a robust fishing vessel with an experienced captain who knew the local waters, but thankfully not their stranger legends. I kept my true intentions to myself, feigning an interest in deep-sea fishing. As we cut through the cerulean waters, leaving the Florida coastline behind, a sense of nervous excitement mingled with a profound dread. This
was no ordinary fishing trip. As we neared the general coordinates, the air grew heavy, almost electric. The ocean, usually a calming expanse, now felt immense and watchful. The captain, a grizzled man named Sal, muttered about funny currents and a strange feel to the air. He didn't know how right he was. I had the brass compass with me, and as we approached the precise spot, its needle began to oscillate wildly, then settled, pointing straight down, as if to something directly beneath us. The light metallic tang my grandfather described in his journal was distinct now, almost palpable. The compass, glowing faintly in my hand, was now an extension of my grandfather's silent command. It pointed straight down, into the inky depths where the sun's light barely penetrated. Sal, the captain, watched me with a puzzled frown. "Everything all right there, boss?" he asked, his voice tinged with a weariness that suggested he'd seen stranger things than a man staring intently at a compass in the middle of nowhere, but perhaps not by much. Just taking some readings," I mumbled, forcing a smile. I knew I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. The metallic tang in the air grew stronger, almost like ozone before a lightning strike, or the scent of an old electrical transformer. It felt wrong, unsettling, yet strangely magnetic. My plan, if one could call it that, was audacious. I had brought a remotely operated underwater vehicle, an ROV, equipped with a high-definition camera and sonar. It was a professional piece of equipment, rented under the guise of marine archaeology, specifically searching for a lost Spanish galleon, a convenient cover story for what I truly sought. I launched the ROV, its thrusters humming softly as it slipped beneath the waves. The screen on the console flickered to life, showing the blue-green world below. As the ROV descended, the light faded rapidly, giving way to the oppressive darkness of the deep ocean. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. Sal, sensing my shift in demeanor, leaned over, peering at the sonar screen. "Getting anything interesting, son?" he grunted. "Just a lot of deep ocean," I replied, my eyes glued to the display. But then, a faint anomaly appeared on the sonar, a blip, distinct from the natural contours of the seafloor. It was large, impossibly smooth, and perfectly geometric. It didn't look natural. It looked constructed. "Whoa," Sal whistled softly. "That ain't no galleon. Looks like a perfect square on the bottom." His eyes, usually sharp, widened slightly. He might not believe in ghosts, but even he could recognize something out of place. As the ROV descended further, the camera's powerful lights cut through the gloom. And then, I saw it. It wasn't wreckage. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a structure. Massive, obsidian black, and unlike anything human. It stood on the seafloor like a forgotten monument, impossibly ancient, yet eerily pristine. Its surface was seamless, reflecting the ROV's lights in an unsettling, non-uniform way, as if the material itself absorbed light. My grandfather's drawing of the metallic object flashed in my mind. This was it, or part of it. The sheer scale of the structure was breathtaking and terrifying. It wasn't just a perfect square, as Sal had initially observed on sonar. As the ROV circled, I saw it was a colossal, geometrically perfect cube, rising hundreds of feet from the ocean floor. Its surface was a dull, light-absorbing black, devoid of any discernible seams or markings, save for faint, almost imperceptible lines that crisscrossed its expanse, hinting at an intricate alien design beneath the smooth exterior. It looked like a monument to an unknown civilization, a silent, ancient sentinel guarding the ocean's deepest secrets. "What in the blazes is that?" Sal whispered, his gruff demeanor replaced by genuine awe and a touch of fear. He was no longer just curious, he was unnerved. I don't know," I replied,
though a part of me did. This was the anomaly my grandfather wrote about. This was the source of the whispers, the thin veil, and it was unequivocally not of this world. I maneuvered the ROV closer, my hands sweating on the controls. The camera's lights glided over the smooth, dark surface. Then I saw them, etched into one side of the cube, almost invisible against the black, were the same strange symbols my grandfather had painstakingly drawn in his journal, the very symbols that adorned the metallic object in his sketch. This was the connection. This was the proof. As the ROV drifted past the symbols, the feed on the screen began to distort. The image flickered, pulsed with static, and a low, resonant hum, barely audible through the boat's speakers, filled the cabin. It wasn't interference. It was a sound emanating from the structure itself, a deep, vibrational hum that seemed to resonate not just in the air, but in my very bones. My grandfather's journal entries about the visitors and the protocol flooded my mind. Was this a beacon? A machine? A portal? What unimaginable power lay dormant within this colossal cube? Then, just as quickly as it started, the hum subsided and the image stabilized. But something had changed. One of the symbols, previously inert, now glowed with a faint internal luminescence, a soft, ethereal blue. It pulsed rhythmically, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. It was an invitation, or a warning. I carefully guided the ROV towards the glowing symbol. As it got closer, the symbol seemed to ripple, to shift, as if the solid surface was becoming fluid. It was an optical illusion, I told myself, but my rational mind struggled to keep pace with the impossible reality unfolding before me. Suddenly, a new image appeared on the ROV screen, superimposed over the live feed. It was a faint, almost transparent projection, like a holographic ghost. It was a vision of what looked like the interior of the cube. Corridors of shimmering light, vast chambers filled with intricate machinery unlike anything known to man. And at the very center, a pulsating core of pure energy. And in those corridors, moving with an eerie grace, were silhouettes, tall, slender figures, undeniably non-human, the visitors. "Good God," Sal muttered, stepping back, his face pale. He'd seen the projection too. The reality of it was undeniable. The journal had spoken of the architect of shadows. Was this it? This colossal alien cube and the entities within, watching, waiting, operating just beyond the veil of our perception? Flight 19, Elias Thorne, my grandfather's secret. It was all converging here at this impossible monument in the deep. And I realized with a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean's cold, that I wasn't just observing, I was being observed. And my grandfather's roadmap might have been less about discovery and more about awakening something that preferred to remain undisturbed. The holographic projection flickered, then solidified, becoming clearer, sharper. The silhouettes within the cube were no longer vague forms, but distinct beings, tall, almost ethereal, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed subtly larger than human, without discernible facial features, yet radiating an intelligence that was palpable even through the grainy projection. They moved with a purpose, a quiet efficiency, tending to the pulsating energy core at the heart of the structure. This was not a derelict ruin, it was an active, operational facility, and Project Aegis, I now understood, was likely humanity's attempt to understand or even counter it. Sal, completely unnerved, stumbled back to the helm. He stammered, his voice hoarse. "We gotta go. Whatever that is, we don't belong here." A primal instinct urged me to agree. Every fiber of my being screamed to retreat, to flee from this impossible alien presence. But my grandfather's journal, the weight of his secret, held me captive. I had come too far. As the ROV hovered near the glowing symbol, the holographic projection shifted again. This time, it wasn't an internal view. It was a sequence of images, flashing rapidly, a torrent of visual data. First, a stylized depiction of Earth, ancient and swirling with unformed continents. Then a shower of celestial objects, meteors streaking towards it, followed by the formation of ancient civilizations, grand pyramids, advanced structures that predated known history. Then a series of global catastrophes, floods, ice ages, depicted with chilling realism. And then, the images shifted to Flight 19, a perfect, vivid recreation of the 5 Avenger bombers flying in formation, the sun glinting off their wings. The radio chatter, a cacophony of confusion and disorientation, seemed to echo in my mind, even though there was no audio. I saw the lead pilot, Lieutenant Taylor, bewildered, announcing, "Everything is wrong. Even the ocean looks strange." Then, the anomaly. A shimmering, transparent vortex opening in the sky above the plains. Not a storm, but a ripple in reality itself. The Avengers, one by one, were drawn into it, not crashing, but simply vanishing. Vanishing into the vortex, their lights winking out as if they had merely stepped into another room.
The holographic depiction of Flight 19's disappearance was undeniably real, not a simulation. It was a recorded event played back for me by the silent architects of the deep. It showed the planes not crashing, but phasing out of existence, pulled into a shimmering, non-natural vortex. The sheer cold clarity of the visuals was horrifying. They hadn't been lost, they had been taken. Then the projection shifted again, this time displaying complex schematics and blueprints. They weren't alien designs, but human. There were diagrams of advanced sonar systems, electromagnetic field generators, and a peculiar type of energy shield, all bearing a familiar inscription: Project Aegis. My grandfather's secret. The holographic sequence then showed military ships and submarines deployed in a grid formation around the very coordinates where we now floated. They were attempting to contain or study the anomaly. I saw my grandfather in the projection, younger, sharper, his face etched with a desperate intensity, working alongside Elias Thorne, who was gesturing frantically at a console. They weren't just observing, they were actively involved. My grandfather wasn't merely a supply clerk, he was an integral part of a top-secret naval intelligence unit, likely involved in the scientific or technical aspects of Project Aegis. His official military record was a deep cover, a meticulously crafted lie designed to bury his true role. Elias Thorne's accident was almost certainly a consequence of his direct involvement, a silencing perhaps by their own side to prevent the truth from leaking. The projection then fast-forwarded. It showed repeated attempts by Project Aegis to interact with the alien cube. Some attempts resulted in bizarre energy fluctuations, others in equipment failures, and in one chilling instance, the temporary disappearance of a small research vessel, only for it to reappear days later, its crew catatonic. My grandfather's journal entries about the veil, the visitors, and the protocol were no longer cryptic, they were chillingly literal. The veil was the barrier between our dimension and theirs, a barrier the cube could manipulate. The visitors were the entities within. The protocol was Aegis's desperate set of countermeasures and studies. The final sequence of the projection showed something truly devastating. A massive, concentrated energy pulse emanating from the alien cube, directed not at the Aegis fleet, but upwards, towards the atmosphere, then outwards, across the entire planet. It was subtle, undetectable by conventional means, but the holographic data indicated it was a form of signal, a transmission, a message, or perhaps a form of control.
The holographic projection ended abruptly, leaving me in stunned silence. The rhythmic hum from the deep ocean structure, the only sound. Sal, his face ashen, clutched the helm, staring out at the empty expanse of the sea. He had witnessed everything. He now knew the impossible truth. The final image, that subtle, planet-spanning energy pulse, replayed in my mind. It wasn't just a signal. My grandfather's cryptic notes about the whispers and mind's eye suddenly clicked into place. This alien cube wasn't just taking planes, it was broadcasting. Broadcasting something that subtly influenced human consciousness, guiding our thoughts, perhaps even shaping our history. It was a silent, insidious form of control, a global network of influence emanating from this very spot in the Bermuda Triangle. I remembered my grandfather's paranoia, his meticulous codes, his insistence on documenting everything without ever speaking it out loud. He wasn't just protecting a secret, he was fighting against a pervasive, unseen influence. Project Aegis wasn't just about recovering Flight 19 or studying an anomaly. It was about understanding, and perhaps even disrupting, this extraterrestrial mind control network. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. As the last holographic image faded, the glowing blue symbol on the cube intensified. The ROV, seemingly under its own volition, began to move closer despite my frantic attempts to override the controls. It was as if the cube itself was pulling it in. The camera feed began to distort once more, but this time it wasn't static. It was something else. A new projection, raw and unsettling, appeared on my screen. It was a live feed, but not from the ROV. It was from within the cube. I saw the sleek, ethereal beings moving through their glowing corridors, tending to the pulsating energy core. But this time, they weren't just silhouettes. They were clearer, sharper. Their forms were slender, almost elegant, with no discernible mouth or nose. Just large, dark almond-shaped eyes that seemed to absorb all light. And then, one of them turned. It looked directly into the camera, directly at me. A feeling of intense cold washed over me, a profound sense of being utterly exposed. It wasn't aggressive, not hostile in a conventional sense. It was an assessment. A silent, ancient intelligence had acknowledged my presence. Then, a voice, not heard through my ears, but directly in my mind. A resonant, emotionless whisper that was both alien and perfectly clear. We have been watching. You seek truth, but some truths are not for you. You have been warned. The ROV's feed immediately cut out. The screens went black. The humming from the deep ceased. The glowing symbol on the cube vanished, and the metallic tang in the air dissipated. It was as if the entire colossal structure had simply powered down. The ocean returned to its normal, unsettling silence. I sat there frozen, the alien voice still echoing in my consciousness. They knew. They had always known. My grandfather wasn't just observing an alien presence, he was observed by them, and now so was I. The warning was unequivocal. My pursuit of the truth had been noted, and I had crossed a line. The secret wasn't just about Flight 19 or Project Aegis. It was about understanding, and perhaps even disrupting, this extraterrestrial mind control network. The journey back was a blur of silent apprehension. Sal, visibly shaken,
handled the boat with grim determination, barely speaking a word. The vast, indifferent ocean felt heavier, more menacing than before. We were two men carrying an impossible truth, a truth that had whispered in my mind from an entity beyond comprehension. The alien warning, "You seek truth, but some truths are not for you. You have been warned," resonated with every beat of my heart. It wasn't a threat of physical harm, not exactly. It was a declaration of superior knowledge, a chilling assertion of control. They weren't hiding, they were simply operating in plain sight, on a frequency we weren't tuned into, a reality we weren't meant to fully grasp. My grandfather, with his journals and cryptic warnings, was simply one of the few, the very few, who had stumbled onto their broadcast. Back on land, the mundane world felt alien. The vibrant colors of Miami, the bustling crowds, the everyday worries, they all seemed like a fragile illusion, a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep us oblivious. How could I go back to my ordinary life knowing what I now knew? Knowing that beneath the waves, a colossal, ancient machine hummed, influencing, observing, perhaps even directing humanity. I tried to share my findings cautiously at first. I approached a fringe academic, a former colleague who had always been open to unconventional theories. I showed him the journal, the compass, the raw ROV footage that I had managed to salvage before the feed cut out. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed, but his eyes held a subtle skepticism. He attributed the ROV anomalies to equipment malfunction, the hum to deep-sea seismic activity, and the journal to a brilliant but delusional mind. He suggested I take a break. He suggested I see someone. It was then I realized the depth of their influence. It wasn't about silencing me with threats. It was about ensuring that anything I said would be dismissed as lunacy. They didn't need to censor me. They merely needed to cultivate a world where such truths were inherently unbelievable. The global network wasn't about overt control, but subtle conditioning, and it was terrifyingly effective. I locked away my grandfather's journal once more, but this time the cedar chest felt less like a container for secrets and more like a tomb for inconvenient truths. The brass compass lay beside it, its needle now perpetually twitching, restless, pointing to no true north, but rather to the eternal presence of the anomaly. My life is different now. I see the world through a new lens. Every news headline, every societal shift, every unexplained phenomenon, I now view through the filter of the architects of shadows. I find myself wondering if my own thoughts are truly my own, or if they too are part of the subtle, global broadcast. I decided to create these stories, to record my journey, not for fame or fortune, but because my grandfather couldn't, because the truth, no matter how unbelievable, needs to be whispered, needs to be echoed into the dark. It is my burden and my responsibility to share what I've learned, however subtly, however gradually. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps consider the vastness of the ocean, the silence of the stars, and wonder, just for a moment, if the dreams that come to you are truly your own. Because somewhere out there, in the unfathomable depths, something ancient is watching, and perhaps it's listening. Just as it listened to my grandfather, just as it listened to me, and now perhaps it's listening to you.